Wow. What, I guess, just the time that you've been doing this research, have you observed just a greater acceptance of pornography? And if so, can you, list some examples of where you're seeing this just being a more commonplace? No, it's not really that big of a deal to anyone anymore?
Well, everybody out there knows it. You turn on the television, and even leftists are shocked at the kind of thing you see on TV, much less in the films, the language that we're hearing, the four-letter words that nobody even used before, much less find on television. And, of course, there's always Victoria's Secrets and Victoria's, in our local malls. And we have, of course, Sinclair's that sells pornography in all your local malls and sells this stuff even to children. And, of course, we have Sears and Roebuck catalog that's been doing lesbian scenes and orgy scenes in order to sell their clothing. So, yeah, I'd say we've changed. And it really, those of us who are of age to remember that when the worst thing Sears ever did was to have some underwear images, and they were as mild-mannered as anything, and still people were a little bit shocked by them. So, but they were really selling the underwear. So, it's in our face everywhere, and the kids say it's in their face everywhere, and, of course, it's in the classroom in the form of sexually explicit graphic sex material that children are being taught and wanting to give little kiddies demonstrations of how to use condoms, knowing full well nobody really uses those condoms. And Sweden is producing little miniature condoms now, because they say the little boys should be using condoms. I mean, it's insane, Mr. and Mrs. America. It is insane.
Would it be accurate to say this is socially engineered sexual deviance?
Oh, absolutely, it's socially engineered sexual deviance. I mean, you're talking about fortunes being made by highly questionable people, by what we would call the bad guys, and by emasculating your men, and by revolutionizing your women so that your women are part of the problem instead of part of the solution. You betcha. You're talking about socially engineering a society that cannot stand up for itself eventually, that cannot even protect its own children. How bad is that?
Doesn't get much worse, in my opinion. I mean, wow. Again, our guest for today's program, Dr. Judith Reisman. Please, the website, again, drjudithreisman.com or .org. Last name, again, is Reisman. Or you can just click her name if you're listening at Blog Talk Radio. You can just click her name, and it'll take you right to her website. Excuse me.
And they should tell them to get the book.
Oh, yes, please, the book, brand new. Just came out a couple weeks ago, Sexual Sabotage.
At any local bookstore, at worldnetdaily.com. And do get 2 books and bring one to your library and try to make sure that they put it up on the shelf because they're not going to buy it if they can avoid it.
Wow. And that's linked as well. You can click the image and you can get the book right from the website as well. Sexual Sabotage, How One Mad Scientist Unleashed a Plague of Corruption and Contagion on America. I'm all about equipping my listeners, giving them information, and sometimes just being able to give them a term that will help them better understand what's happening around them. Can you explain what you mean when you use the term erototoxin?
Erototoxins, yes. It's a toxic form of eros. The whole idea that eros is benign is ludicrous. When, in fact, the erotic becomes dysfunctional for the brain, it is by definition toxic to the brain. And so that is absolutely what all pornography, and I include, by the way, Playboy magazine, please understand, because you don't get where we are today without having started somewhere else. And the somewhere else is always where it began as a benign appearing, experience. So neurochemically, and I talk about that to some extent in the book and in a prior book I did called Soft Porn Plays Hard hardball. But neurochemically, you were talking about material that is disorienting the brain, that is raising the thermostat, the pleasure thermostat of the brain to an extent that normal, healthy sexual activity no longer stimulates the individual adequately. That, ladies and gentlemen, makes it an erototoxin, toxic to the brain.
And I've read some of the articles you emailed me as well, and you said in the article, Picture Poison, viewing pornography for a living can be deadly, that the more bizarre or strange the sexual image, the more likely you are that you're going to remember it. It's going to really stick in your mind. Is that accurate?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And all the brain science data now confirm that. They're taught. We now know what we've known all along, but it now has names and now has all sorts of hard MRI, brain study proofs. And that is that we have something called the mirror neurons, which means that when you're looking at these kinds of sexual activities, just like when you're looking at violent activities, you're going to feel in the relevant component part of your body the kinds of stimuli that you're experiencing. That's why you don't look at pornography, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a good thing to do. That is supposed to be a private relationship that you have with a human being you can trust and love and honor. The minute you step into that kind of world, you're stepping into a world of shame and hostility, and that then hikes up the level of arousal. So, yeah, you get a couple that's committing adultery. They're in the hotel, and they've been planning this for years, and they're going to go for it, right? And somebody else fire. Ladies and gentlemen, that couple is not going to stay there and goof around. They are grabbing a pair of pants and they're out that, or a robe or something, and out the door of that hotel fast as can be. Why? Because fear is much higher a stimuli than is sex. Pornography was never just about sex. No way. If it was, it would have no real value over your relationship with someone that you love. It is always about hiking your arousal due to the added sensation of fear, shame, hostility, and other kinds of stimuli. So don't ever think when you're responding to an erotic, quote-unquote, picture that you're just responding to that dear love between that nice man and that nice lady. Forget it. You're talking about knowing that you're engaged in some kind of voyeuristic observation, knowing that you're peering at people you should not be peering at because that's instinctive. And once you know that, you're feeling shame and you're feeling embarrassment, and that's if it's even just nice stuff.
You said peering at people that you know you shouldn't be peering at. You're voyeur. Okay. You write about how that's another aspect, another damaging aspect of pornography is that it blurs the boundaries between what's private and what's public. Is that accurate? Mm-hmm.
Oh, very accurate, very accurate. And our laws had been, pre-Kinsey, based upon our knowledge that there's private behavior and there's public behavior, and that much of what goes on in private absolutely does not belong in the public sphere. And that then changed once we began to say that the public did no longer have any control over sexuality because it's a private activity. The minute that happened, we began to lose control over our ability to monitor that sort of behavior. So that's why it slipped out into the public sphere. And it came through pornography into the public arena, and from pornography into your local, your local malls and your TVs and everything else. So, you're not meant to be voyeurs. You're not meant to be peering at other people's private activity. Neither their hygienic activity nor their sexual activity. And the minute we begin to do those kinds of things, we're worse than animals, because animals basically try to do things like that in the bush.
Wow. This is a different, as I said, to the folks who are listening to this broadcast, please visit her website because Dr. Reisman, she has just a ton of information. One of the articles on your site, The Naked Truth, an interview with you, on page 4, you're talking about how a lot of the stimulus and arousal that people get from pornography, involuntary. I mean, your brain just starts firing when you see these images. And you wrote that it's not exclusively a heterosexual problem, that this can also happen with homosexual stimulus.
Sure.
An individual is exposed to homosexual material, and due to confusion, shame, and hostility, he or she feels aroused. The individual is really just in a state of crisis, but the brain interprets it as arousal, which causes him or her to self-identify as homosexual. That really jumped out at me because I heard someone who identifies as homosexual almost give that story verbatim.
Yeah. If you talk to many homosexuals or people who think that they're homosexual, people who have been seduced into this activity, they will confirm those kinds of stimuli as taking place, and they try to rationalize. Now, when you're in a society that is pushing homosexuality as normal everywhere you turn, then what you're going to have is it becomes extremely difficult for that confused person, and usually they're teenagers. Usually it's a younger person who's confused as it is. I always find it amazing. Kids go to school and they're confused by mathematics and all. They don't suddenly decide that somehow because they don't understand mathematics that makes them a bizarre individual. But because they're confused about their sexuality, and people are always confused. They want somebody to love them. They want to be admired. They want to be treasured, right? And so. And they're frightened because there's such a desire for that pretty girl or that handsome young man to find them wonderful and then not to exploit them. There's so many nuances. There's so much confusion there. So much crisis that takes place. And I have interviewed more people who have been caught in that crisis, and then they've been told by older persons who seem to be knowing so much more that they're homosexual, and they're caught within that framework, and that has directed their lives, and they can die, as a result. By the way, you mentioned the article I did on viewing, and I should reaffirm to the public, to your public, that within the Department of Justice now, they're having to give people who look at pornography for any length of time, they're having to give these people special treatments and give them periods of time off because they are so disturbed by the stimuli that they're seeing. So there's a great recognition now amongst the professionals in the field that what they have to look at is highly disorienting for their lives, so that they're being treated. Now, that treatment is not available to the average person, the average teenager. And by the way, none of this is covered by the First Amendment. Images aren't covered by the First Amendment. Children can decipher images and decode them. Illiterate people can decipher images and decode them. That means they're not speech. They are something else entirely. They're an arousal stimulus, and they, in fact, subvert the speech process, subvert the meaning and the mission of the speech process. There's nothing there that's consensual. It happens without their consent, and it happens to override all cognitive processes. There's no